Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now, we are joined by Eli, 10th Man, Refracted Curvature, Arwin, Neil, and a whole bunch of people in Discord. So welcome, one and all.
Good morning, good morning.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Today we're going to do housekeeping with a little twist. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail about how the arguments came to pass. It may fill the whole show. We might still do it in 20 minutes. We'll see how we get on. But I'm going to do it in a different order, because otherwise we will undoubtedly get hung up on the most prevalent argument of the moment, which we've discussed in the entirety of the pre-show, which would be the elevation angle argument, which is to say you cannot acquire an elevation angle from a curved baseline. You can only do celestial navigation if the Earth is flat. So, any evidence that you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon?
No, they need to demonstrate it if they think otherwise, but pressure is defined as gas molecules hitting the sides of a container, something solid, something contained.
Well, if you think of the container as not a container, it might work.
Well, if I was just going to
Gas
play,
pressure,
Try not to throw too
gas
much
pressure is
confusing
the
stuff in.
force
We just
that
want to...
the gas exerts on the walls of the container. So no.
Yeah, you need to press on the walls of a container. Just for Arwin's benefit, I just want to keep it as concise and on point in terms of the demolition as possible. I'm glad Brian's joined, because it was Brian's suggestion that we do this. Hey, Brian.
hey Nathan, what
Hello.
was it I suggested?
You said maybe go through the housekeeping question in a little bit more detail, so we don't necessarily brush past the whys and wherefores and importance, relevance, and need to ask daily of each of these questions, without it just being no, 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 and then we bash through it, or we spend 45 minutes on one question debating about it. But yeah, I'm starting in reverse order. I've asked about gas pressure without a container. Lots of people on the panel and in Discord have pointed out that, you know, you need the walls of a container for gas to press upon. We all breathe gas. We're in a high pressure gas environment. And the assertion is that we've got a sky vacuum, an empty space. Well, that empty space would be in line with entropic law, where the gas would vacate to if it was real. In other words, the gas would never develop pressure in the first place. We'd be in a suffocating vacuum at sea level, because any gas that escaped the rocks would immediately dissipate into the space. Now, the space we're talking about is outer space, a claim to be vacuum area of available volume for the gas we breathe to fill. So the gas would expand out unless impeded by a container. So when we ask any evidence that you can have gas pressure, that would be the gas pressure we're all breathing, we're in a high pressure gas environment, without a container, in line with the claim that we have a sky vacuum, that would be outer space. The answer is no. The gas would fill the space. We'd all be dead if the sky vacuum, an area where spacemen are claimed to travel and satellites are claimed to beg the question of an orbital motion, that area would leave us all dead. It's a violation of natural law. Outer space is fake. Ergo, all claims of imagery, travel, orbital motion in space are all, by default, automatically debunked. You can't travel to the moon through a second law of thermodynamics violation. Sky vacuum, the gas we breathe would fill the space. If they can travel into that area, then so can the gas. That's what gas does. It expands to fill space. You can't have an orbital motion in a sky vacuum. If the motion of the orbit of the satellite is in a sky vacuum, then the gas can also be in that area. There's nothing impeding its motion into that area, and that's precisely what gas wants to do. Pop a balloon, it's at mildly higher pressure than the pressure you experience as a norm. And what happens? Pop! Well, that's the gas at a slightly higher pressure dissipating to equalise into the available volume it has. Well, there's no balloon around a sphere Earth. It's just an empty space around sphere Earth. It's an absolute nonsense. Outer space is fake. Okay, has anybody got anything to add to that housekeeping question?
I have. John, do you want to go first? I hear you. I see your light flashing. I'll go in after you if you like.
Well, I was just going to say, do you want me to give the heliocentric answer that most people believe so that the relevance of the question is more obvious?
It's on screen right now. Go ahead.
Well, as you go up, the pressure goes down until it reaches an almost perfect vacuum, doesn't it? I mean, you can go outside and see that, right?
Again, that's a violation of natural law. So if you're saying that the gas pressure gradient dissipates to a vacuum, then no, there wouldn't be any gas pressure because it would have nothing to press upon. It doesn't develop into a ever thinning amount of gas unless it's under a contained scenario in the first place. First gas pressure, then gas pressure gradient. I actually thought you were going to say gravity. It's what I expected. Just shout out to Mike. One sec. Shout out to Mike 808. Thank you very much for the super chat. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the thing about that is that, like the argument of a gradient, right? Besides them claiming gravity, right? The argument of gradient is a really silly argument because I concede with certain things when they ask us questions. How does this happen? How does that happen? I concede I don't know, right? Because any answer I could give just wouldn't make any sense. But the gradient claim from them is really, really ridiculous because you would have to have the forming of pressure in the first place for the gradient to exist. And they say that the gradient is just a constant gradient of less and less and less pressure as you go higher, higher, higher. This is true, but it's not a uniform gradient, like they say. Because what happens is the majority, and I mean the majority, when I say the majority, I'm talking about, you could say safely 75 to 80% and more than likely, of all our air supply is below the cloud level. So wherever you see clouds in the sky, let's just say, wherever that would be in your area, right? Or let's just say a few miles up, right? You're talking below 6 miles. That's where the majority of our air supply is. And that's because of the oxygen and nitrogen cycles, which make up the majority, 95 or 99, they say. They say 99, I don't know how true that is, it's a calculation. But you could say the majority of our air, over 90%, maybe over 95%, is oxygen and nitrogen. And they're recycling constantly with the surface of Earth. So it's a constant recycle. And then you have the other gases, including water vapor, right, which rises up to these boundary layers to create the clouds, blah, blah, blah. So you have a whole system going on there just a couple of miles up. After that, it continues to thin out and get colder and colder. It gets colder and colder and colder up to 10 miles up where it reaches minus 51 degrees, right, Celsius. After that, though, it starts to heat up. And this is a funny thing. Mr. Sensible sent up his balloons. It was the second one he sent up. He said his second Mage or whatever. And he got a reading at about 24 miles up or 22 miles up or something like that of, I think it was maybe a bit more than that. And it was plus 5 degrees, right? Now, because after 10 miles up, it changes. The temperatures start to rise. But what happens is, because of it being minus 51 at 10 miles up, and majority of our air being below basically cloud level or whatever, even if you're in a place like it's very hot that doesn't have much clouds, all the air is still recycling just a couple of miles above the surface. So what you have is a situation where you have very, very little air for a start getting past the cloud layer. Anything that does ends up becoming part of the convection cells, which then the larger convection cells, which then recycle the air, bring it back down. So it's basically, as I showed in my presentation before, it's a conveyor system. It's like a massive filter system that cleans the air. So we end up with constantly clean air, or new cleaner air being basically brought back down to Earth. And that's basically what happens. It's a whole cycle system. So anything past 10 miles up, there's very, very little air getting past that due to the temperatures. And anything that does get past that, it has to start reaching zero before it's going a zero temperature, which would be miles and miles and miles up. You could talk in maybe 20 miles up or more before it starts reaching zero. And I mean, that's 10 miles above where it is minus 51. So to get back to zero, it has to go at least another 10 miles up. So how with the tiny amount of air that gets up there, it is a gradient, but how are they expecting an increase in they expect there's going to be an increase in, or they would ask us, how come there's not an increase in pressure with the increase in temperature? Right, forgetting that there isn't an increase in temperature or in pressure with the increase in temperature within their claim. So the reason that we don't have that is because of the tiny amount of air that gets up to that point. And it's not until it starts going above zero before you could talk about any real pressure changes happening, right? Any really that you could and there's not enough there to really there's not enough air up there to even create those temperatures. So the ozone layer, there is ozone up there, but there is no ozone layer. That's a complete load of rubbish. So what's creating this extra heat up there? It has to be radiative heat. The sun heating something above it. It has to be. Sun heating a solid surface, something radiative. That's what's creating this extra heat. So they keep on talking about gravity creating a pressure gradient. So they're claiming PV equals nRG, not PV equals nRT. They completely ignore the temperature part. And that's why they have to make up this. I know I'm kind of I'm waffling on here now, but that's why they had to make up this ozone layer, because they had no answer for how come things are getting warmer when there's less and less air. Once you go past 10 miles up, how come it's getting warmer? They know why. NASA knows why, but the general everyday idiot who doesn't have a clue. So it's easy to tell them it's due to an ozone layer. It's like 15 parts per million at its highest concentration. That's what ozone is. At its highest concentration, at 22 miles up, it's 15 parts per million. That's nothing. There's no ozone layer creating an insulation. It's the insulation of heat that's up there is coming from, I think, the sun. It has to be a radiative heat, the sun heating a surface above us. Anyway, but I'm after waffling on off.
That's all right.
As someone new to this,
go on, John.
I was going to say, as someone new to this subject, I think Brian may have lost them.
Yeah, I
to say that
didn't.
anything he said
I
was
wasn't going to
wrong.
mention that. Let's just keep it. Let's not focus on that. That'll make it even more dilute. Move on. That's my attitude. Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Well,
You
you
pick it
won't
up and
find
drop
it.
something.
I was just going to say you won't find it with a gas pressure gradient.
No, but is there any
Just pick
scientific
something up and
evidence?
drop.
Any scientific evidence of gravity? And then we're going to get into why we ask.
No, there isn't.
No, just mathematics.
Okie dokie. So why would we ask for scientific evidence of something? I'll answer. Because they're claimed with the whole body of science to have proven this crap. That's why we ask for science. We're told that science, that would be the preachings of people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, are science. And it's not. science would be the study of the physical and natural world, and that would start with an observed phenomena, and gravity doesn't have one. It's either mass attracting mass now superseded by pseudo-Riemannian force-space-time bending, a conceptual medium, space-time, bent. And what caused that? Oh, well, the uneven distribution of mass in this fourth dimension that we don't experience. So this isn't something that exists in physical reality. It's abstract. So there is no scientific evidence of gravity. They'll never show you a physical phenomena because there isn't one. There is no
But when we
bending
pick
space-time.
something up,
Go ahead, John.
but when we pick something up and let go of it, it falls back down to the ground.
Releases helium balloon and laughs.
But I didn't pick up the helium balloon, did I?
I did.
Yeah, either way. Gas
And I'm watching
expands.
it go up into the sky.
This notion of an always down vector is defied by gas. Gas expands in all directions, all vectors, to fill the availability of volume. It doesn't have a downward bias. It's not going down, go boom, boom. Gas expands in all directions. So no, saying that you just drop something, well, only if it's more dense than the air that it's passing through.
Well, I was watching a show called Globebusters, and they said it's due to incoherent dielectric acceleration.
Who cares? That's not exactly
Objection.
a widespread mainstream understanding. So some tin pot little channel talking about dielectric incoherent acceleration doesn't faze me when the entirety of the Western world are under the misapprehension that gravity is either a force that's 107 years out of date, misascribed to Newton, or the bending of a conceptual medium in current rhetoric.
But then they sent me over to this guy named Kent Wheeler, and he's got a whole YouTube channel on it.
I couldn't care less. The mainstream Western world heliocentric gravity is well defined. It's either mass attracting mass, falsely ascribed to Newtonian, actually Reverend John Michell, C.V. Boys, and Cavendish gravity, superseded 107 years ago by Einsteinian pseudo-Riemannian force space-time, bending as a result of the uneven distribution of mass according to his abstract mathematics. That's what gravity is. I don't care what anybody on YouTube says. Meanwhile, there's no scientific evidence for it. Show me gravity. Show me space-time. Show me mass attracting mass. Oh right, gas has mass, according to you. Well, that's not attracting. Quite the opposite, in fact. Elastic collisions, bouncing off.
Well,
Again, as a
as
direct result. Go on.
Sorry, yeah, I don't know if I should even be talking after the waffle I went on earlier, but I'll try anyway. But as I stated in one of my short videos, objects, because most people believe that gravity is a force. Now they're wrong, because it's not described that way anymore by mainstream pseudoscience. But the fact that people do believe it, and we argue with a lot of people, or we have argued over the years with a lot of people that state that it's a force, right? Objects weigh more in a vacuum, right? If it was a force creating a gas pressure gradient, right, that would mean that it's pushing down, right? It's pushing down air, right, creating a pressure on the surface of Earth. So if objects weigh more in a vacuum, then that can't be happening, can it? Objects should weigh less in a vacuum under those circumstances, but they don't. Objects weigh more. So for the average everyday person out there, you can be sure there is no gravity creating a gas pressure gradient, because objects would weigh less in the vacuum if there was. But they don't, they weigh more.
Off the back of that, we also ask for any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics. That is to say, any science from any of the fields that claim have proof of a sphere. When you hear, the whole body of science proves we're on a sphere, that's who we're referring to. Okay, so science proves we're on a sphere. What's your science?
Well, I know a particular theoretical physicist who says nobody in my field uses the scientific method. It's leaps of logic. It's seat of the pants. It's guesswork. Michio Kaku.
So when we're asking for a viable hypothesis from any of those fields, we're asking for, in the most diluted, simplistic, dumbed down way, step 2 in the scientific method. Step 1, observe natural phenomena. Step 2, formulate hypothesis. Step 3, perform systematic experimentation to validate your hypothesis. So, step 2, formulation of a valid hypothesis. Well, once you've observed the natural phenomena, which they definitely have in those fields, you've got half of the hypothesis, because the naturally occurring phenomena you're observing is the thing that you want to find out why it's occurred. That's the thing you're studying. Why did that happen? Right? Now enter what the pseudo-scientists of those fields actually give you if you believe you're on a sphere. They'll give you a little story. Meanwhile, in an actual hypothesis, you have a presumed cause of the effect. So, your natural phenomena is your dependent variable. Your presumed cause of that phenomena is your independent variable. So let's call your dependent variable B and your independent variable A. A is your assumed cause of the effect, and B is the effect you are studying. Once you've got those two things, you can then formulate the other half of the hypothesis, which is a null, which is to say, if A, your presumed cause, not B, the effect. In other words, you vary your presumed cause and it doesn't cause the effect. Then you have a full, valid hypothesis. If my presumed effect A, then B, the effect. I vary this, it causes the thing I'm studying. And, including, if A, the thing I think causes this effect, not B, it does not cause the effect. So, you just need a phenomena and a presumed cause of it. That's all you need. Now, that simplistic description of the scientific method and the formulation of a hypothesis, has any of the people claimed to be scientists and giving you science for a sphere got that? Not an experiment, I haven't detailed that, just hypothesis construction. Have any of them got that?
No. And you would think that they would formulate the hypothesis. They have a claim, and people, I think, mix that up. They have a claim that a force of gravity creates a gas pressure gradient. Now, you would think that they would make an hypothesis out of that. We have a gas pressure gradient. We believe the cause of it is gravity. But they never do that, because that would mean having to put gravity through scientific method in the first place, the force of gravity. So they can't seem to. How can you create any hypothesis when your hypothesis will probably involve something that you've never proven anyway? You know what I mean? How do you do that?
Yeah, they don't even offer up a hypothesis. We've been asking that for about 3 years. Shout out to Godzilla37 who says, okay, you can start the show now. I am here. Thank you very much for the super chat. Also, there's 100 people watching, so I like to shout out people who have subscribed and shared the show dutifully to get us to 100 live viewers. If you have just joined the show, please share the show. It's 1 click or 2 clicks of the share button just below the video you're watching, and then you can disseminate this fantastic information offered up currently by Brian to a whole bunch of people who may not have been exposed to this information. It's the only way we get to them. Anyway.
Yeah.
Now, with what Brian said, oh, sorry.
Just 1 second. Just on the back of what John said earlier, just very quickly, what John said earlier, that I would have lost new people. Well, anyone new listening to what I was saying earlier, I might have been waffling on, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't speaking truth and I don't know about what I'm talking about. Everything I said was true.
Nobody was
that.
questioning that.
Yeah.
You weren't here when we did the intro. We did a big build up to the fact that in a couple of shows ago, you were like, let's not just brush past the housekeeping. Let's actually detail why the question is asked, how we've come to ask the question, and how the question isn't resolvable for a sphere Earth or proves a flat plane. So we started doing that, and then you got into the minutiae of the top level gas pressure gradient, you know, not necessarily focused on the antecedent consequent relationship of the gas pressure in order to develop this detailed explanation within the gas pressure gradient that needed containment. That's why the question about how do you have gas pressure without a container is asked in the housekeeping.
Yeah, I got a bit carried away at myself.
No, it's okay. Doesn't mean you were wrong. Nobody was inferring that either, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, but I'm just saying for new people, that doesn't mean that what I said was wrong, because everything I said was not.
Brian, you are ace. Don't you worry about anything. I understood everything you said.
I know you understand it, Neil. You're not brand new, though. Sorry,
indeed.
I cut down on you.
Okay. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating, we'll cover that in a minute, molten iron core, we all know what that is, at the centre of a presupposed, again, we'll cover R in a minute, spherical Earth. Molten iron core question. My bloody PC is flashing like nuts. I don't know, since I've updated OBS, I'm sorry if you're watching this and you've got epilepsy. The stream is flashing away like a crazy person. I don't know what to do about it. I've tried to adjust a few settings. My bad if it's flashing on your live stream.
When I was in geology class, they showed me a diagram with a cross-sectional cutout of Earth that showed the different layers. Are you saying that they're wrong or lying about that?
Well, they've got it beyond the Curie point, so they've got it as an explanation with a big backstory made up on the spot about a planet smashing into Earth at a glancing blow to deposit its molten iron core, to extend the timeline of the molten iron core, which is still beyond the Curie point, developing magnetic fields. Well, that doesn't work unless it's self-perpetuating, because it's beyond the Curie point in their own rhetoric. Makes no sense even in their own rhetoric.
Plus,
If there was a
anybody
molten iron
validate?
core, wouldn't the surface of the Earth be all the same temperature, say?
What's your question?
If there was a molten iron core at such temperatures, wouldn't the surface of the globe be all relatively the same temperature?
I don't know. I would imagine that it would be absolutely bitterly cold because we'd be in a sky vacuum. You know, this whole idea of having a cushy little gas layer that's keeping us all nice and cosy. It's like, no, you're going to need containment for that. In reality, in a heliocentric world, the tiny little speck of dust they think the Earth is when described as a sphere in a sky vacuum wouldn't retain any of the gas. It would be bitterly cold. But there we go. I don't know if that's what you're asking, though. No? So yeah, it's just nonsense. It's based on a presupposition of a sphere Earth to begin with. And that's based on an R value that we've debunked. So any evidence of the R value, again, daily asked housekeeping question.
Why would you need an R value?
Because
you think it's a sphere.
I almost said every single claim to be globe-proof starts with a begging the question fallacy of a sphere Earth, but that doesn't quite stack up at the moment, because that begging the question fallacy of a sphere Earth requiring the R value to beg that question was acquired by a flat Earth elevation angle. But we'll get to that later, John, if that's what you were driving at.
No, I just don't think most people really think about the idea of the radius and how it's necessary to be on a sphere. Chocolate pretty much answered it.
You just need to measure the distance to the horizon, isn't it?
How do they claim to have measured it?
You can't. They tell us it's all refracted standard. Based on our... Paradoxically speaking, they refract the R value capable horizon where measured into a non-geometric position with the R value that they can no longer measure from that position because they've refracted it. It's a paradox. You can't measure an R value from a geometric horizon to then say the value I got from the measured geometric point on Earth curve edge tangency has given me a value R that I can then imply has a derivative that's always in effect on a sphere Earth, 7/6 of that R value, that's standard refraction. Well, as soon as you do that, the measurement you got for the R value pushes the value that you measured into a different position. So you couldn't have measured it then. Like I say, it's a paradox. So we have debunked the R value.
Isn't it slightly different? Is it slightly different if they're going with Eratosthenes?
Well, that's sticks and shadows.
Mm-hmm. So
We'll
they're
get to
not
that.
using the horizon to derive the radius measurement.
Yeah, we'll get to
in
that.
that case, and people often
We'll get to that last, because it ties into the most talked about subject matter at the moment, doesn't it? When you're measuring angles.
Yeah.
Hint, hint. We'll get to that. I promise.
Officially, it's Al-Biruni. Officially, Al-Biruni took an angle from a high elevation to a geometric horizon. That is the official claim.
That's step 2, though. Damn you, Brian.
I'm just
Step 2.
stating that is officially that's what they claim.
Yeah, but Al-Biruni, you just said he went up a mountain to
the height of the mountain. I know, but I'm talking about if you were just a normal person, a normal everyday person, and you went to college and you were learning this, they would just teach you that. They wouldn't talk about Al-Biruni taking a flat Earth measurement to the mountain or anything like that.
They certainly won't tell you that he had to assume the Earth was flat to calculate the angles to figure out how high his mountain was, to figure out how bent the Earth was. Has to assume it's flat first to get the angles for the height of the mountain, to determine the height of the mountain, to then reify the horizon and calculate the angle down to that as a geometric edge. It is a paradoxical cluster screw itself, isn't it?
Well, it's an acquisition of a radius value for a spherical Earth by way of utilization of an angle measurement taken from a flat Earth. So in order for Al-Biruni to derive the R that he's implying, he had to first measure a flat plane. Yes, we'll get to it later, though. That's what I was telling Brian off for, but you've summarised it so beautifully, Adam.
I better not say what I'm going to say then.
Well, we'll get to it last. We'll get to it last. There's only a couple more questions. Any evidence of the distance to the sun? And we'll go over why we ask it.
No, there's no evidence for the distance to the sun. No, it is an unobtainable distance, as far as we know.
But I've seen Red's rhetoric. Oh my God, I'm going to do it myself, aren't I? Oh, wow, this is interesting. It all seems to lead to this first question. I saw Red's rhetoric take a flat Earth elevation angle measurement, but we'll get to that later. And then insert an R value, which we just covered, to give him a distance that he's going to say is precise when you're looking at the sun, or in fact the moon. I mean, he claimed he could do both. So, given that they take an angle measurement and then insert an R value, I mean, doesn't that give you a distance to the sun?
Insert a R value? Where'd they get that from?
Oh, they got it from a geometric horizon that's now refracted, paradoxically speaking, not allowing them to measure or use the tangent point. Again, that'll bring us back to that first question. Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
Could I just add something to the sun thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
They need to have, what they used was to create what they call a 1 AU, which is one astronomical unit, different from the AUs we know, which is the Arwinian units. 1 AU, one astronomical unit, is the distance, the average distance of the globe Earth to the sun over a 12-month period within the heliocentric model. But that involves the two-way speed of light calculation, because it isn't a measurement. Most people are under the impression it's a measurement. It's not. The calculation is based on 4 pre-assumptions and 2 averages. So that is what is required to get their distance to the heliocentric sun. But there is no one-way speed of light measurement. It was never measured and probably will never be measured.
Perfect.
So
we'll just cover the last before the most important question, because every avenue at the moment seems to lead to the question that we get. discussed for about 20 to 40 minutes on each show currently. So any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety? And then we will cover why we ask.
Well, they say that the stars moving, or what, overhead is the proof that it's actually us spinning.
Yeah, that's Coriolis deflection. So the claim is that Earth's turning beneath the stars relative to our position are stationary, and we're moving beneath them to cause that motion. That's Coriolis deflection, i.e. you turning beneath something on a non-inertial turning reference frame in this instance claimed to be a globe Earth turning beneath the stars. Coriolis deflection. So if the Earth was turning beneath the stars and we were spinning on a non-inertial turning reference frame for that effect to be true, then we would see helicopters drifting away once they entered that inertial reference frame, the frame of reference the stars are in. So, to see Coriolis effect in the stars, we'd have to have Coriolis effect in anything else that's not attached to the non-inertial turning reference frame, and we don't see that effect. Drones can hover. Nothing could hover if we had Coriolis effect. Everything would drift. It's claimed to be the case that we do have drift. Neil deGrasse Tyson examples a ball leaving the claim to be turning reference frame and drifting. That would be a not actual deflection observed from you on the stand as you turn beneath the ball. You and the goalposts turn beneath the ball. That is visually observed, according to him, as a not actual deflection caused by Earth turning beneath the ball. So it curves through the goal. Well, that's deflection. Oh my God. Go on.
I was going to say, I've seen a YouTuber named Simon Dan demonstrate that there was no deflection, and he said that you and your reference frames were ruined.
So we can congratulate Dan for demolishing the heliocentric globe Earth claim that they have two reference frames causing not actual deflection known as Coriolis effect, as you observe things in an inertial reference frame drifting from your vantage point on a non-inertial turning reference frame claimed to be Earth. That's two reference frames required to make the claim. The claim is globe Earth has Coriolis effect. We all know that's the claim. He says reference frames ruined. Okay, I'll accept that. No worries. Thank you very much, Dan. We completely agree. So Simon Dan's now a flat earther, is he? He accepts that we don't have two reference frames in order to make this claim of globe Earth Coriolis. Kudos, Dan. Sing it, brother. Any evidence that you can acquire an elevation angle from a curved baseline? So Al Biruni's going to measure the horizon, right? And he's got an assumption that the horizon is the leading edge of a sphere, a tangent point. And from his vantage point up on the mountain, the Earth that is beneath him is curving away at a rate of 8 inches per mile squared. That is his assumption when he's up the mountain. When he's at the bottom of the mountain, what does he do there, Adam, before he's gone up the mountain and assumed the Earth's curving away and that the leading edge of this geometric tangent point based ball is the horizon he's looking at from the top of the mountain? What's he do to get the height of the mountain?
Well, to get it, and he wants to get it accurate so that his next measurement has any validity. So he needs to use some geometric reference point, and the point he uses, I think, is water, and across a flat plane. And he uses a long, flat, straight baseline to take two angles from, and the distance between the 2 points on that flat baseline allows him to use trigonometry to calculate the height of the mountain off the flat baseline.
I see. So he measures an angle along a flat Earth, moves a bit closer, measures the angle again, and uses a bit of trig and calculates the height. Very simple stuff if you've got a flat plane to do it.
Yeah, he uses that knowledge that the baseline is a straight line, and therefore has a relation. Therefore, the 2 points have a relationship to the top of the mountain geometrically.
I see.
A right angle is, funnily enough, here we've still got a right angle here. The right angle is at the base of the mountain, where obviously you can't go to. It's in the centre and at the bottom of the mountain. But there's your right angle for the geometry that he's using off of that flat baseline for him to then use the angles he's measuring up to the mountain.
Right, but there are instances where you haven't got a piece of rock in your way at the 90. For instance, if you were doing celestial navigation, you'd have a 90 degree below the star along a similar baseline.
Yeah.
And you can travel to that position. In fact, that's very useful, isn't it?
Well, if you're in a boat in the sea, yeah.
But in order to carry out that process, you're going to acquire it by first measuring an elevation angle.
Oh, yeah.
What's an elevation angle?
It's an angle.
It's an angle.
Go on, Rob.
I was just going to say that it's an angle line that requires a horizontal baseline and an absolute vertical at 90 degrees.
It's, yeah.
So if we had
kind of-
coordinates, we'd be working on a flat bottom of the box, in essence.
Yeah. Got to be the triangle we're creating to measure our elevation angle, whether it is the surface of the Earth or whether it's a parallel to the surface. But the important thing is it's straight and parallel. Whether it is exactly sat on the seas for celestial navigation purposes, not important, your altitude, other unless you're taking a dip correction. But the purpose of all this is to generate another straight line which is parallel to the surface.
So in essence,
Yeah.
go on, Brian, you go first.
Thank you, Nathan. I was just going to say, yeah, as long as you're creating an absolute horizontal, you have to create a 90. So that's why you do the dip and height of light correction with a sextant from a boat, because you're using the horizon mirror pointing it at the visible horizon. Whereas with a bubble sextant or with an artificial horizon, you're just creating a horizontal, an imagined horizontal, basically.
Sure, but when I said a coordinate system, let's say for the sake of argument, you've got a guy on a boat. It's a aircraft carrier, and he's holding a sextant, and it's very choppy, and he's rocking it back and forth and getting it as good as he possibly can. And then somebody on the boat says, "I'll go directly above you in this aeroplane, and I will measure the exact same thing with a bubble sextant directly above your position at your zenith." So we'll have two. You'll do it on the boat, I'll do it in the air. But once they've done it with the guy at the boat's zenith, they both have the same parallel line running from their zenith down to the sea, through the boat, through the plane, up to the sky. So when they measure, both of them, the GP of whichever star they're sighting, or the sun, they're both going to get the same 90 degree along a box parallel to their zenith at the GP of the star. Now, higher up, lower down, it doesn't make any difference. They're parallel. Again, if the GP was over the edge of a sphere Earth curving away from them, both of them with a parallel position, i.e. they're both on the same line up from the ground, they've both got the same zenith, the boat and the plane. If it was a sphere Earth, then the position would have drastically curved away from the plane and less so from the boat. They both get different measurements. But in reality, the way they plot it out, the way they actually do it in celestial navigation, is both will get the same reading because they'll both have a parallel line between them and the star they're measuring, with a flat baseline between them for both. It's just the baseline in the aeroplane travels through the air. But it's still flat and can still be flat, parallel with the one on the ground, because the ground's flat, and only works if that is the case. So it doesn't matter if you're using a bubble sextant or using the horizon and doing dip correction. If you are and you're both at the exact same location, coincidentally, let's use a hot air balloon rather than a plane having to circle. The hot air balloon goes up a couple of 1,000 feet, uses a bubble sextant to measure the exact same thing, and what do you know? It all works out with the exact same 90 to the exact same GP along the exact same parallel along the exact same flat plane. Works every time. Earth must be flat for celestial navigation. Celestial navigation is a proof the Earth is flat. It cannot be done on a curved Earth. You cannot acquire an elevation angle from a curved baseline. If you wanted flat Earth silver bullet, this is it. Elevation angle, measurement, proves Earth is flat.
Well, you don't have to use a sextant either, do you? Didn't Eratosthenes measure an elevation angle?
Yeah, let's go through it. Actually, who's it? Somebody else brought up. Was it you who actually brought this up? Because somebody else actually brought this up, and I told them no.
No, it was Elijah.
It was Eli. It was Eli.
Elijah.
It's always Eli.
Yes.
Go, Eli, go.
But my sound is horrendous right now. I'm riding a bike, so
Go, John, go.
All right. Well, from the story, from history that we're taught, that there was a well in, I think, Siam, that at a certain day of the year, the sun would be directly overhead and cast no shadow into that well. And there was an obelisk, I think, 500 miles north of that, and the shadow would cast at a certain degree angle, and he used that angle to measure the radius of Earth.
Angle? Hold on. If you're saying he's using it to measure the radius of Earth, that means that the outside edge of the surface that he's getting that angle from would be curved then, wouldn't it?
No, it can't be curved, or it's not an angle. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's the same problem. So you're saying, I'm going to get a flat Earth angle measurement and then infer a radius curved line along the bottom of the angle I've just measured straight. Yeah, that's not going to work.
I don't guess it would.
How did he even know it was a sphere that he was getting a radius for in the first place?
Because he measured an angle on a flat Earth, chocolate.
Oh yeah,
No,
that checks out.
No, he knew he believed it was a globe because of his chords, like Aristotle and who's that other guy?
I mean Pythagoras.
Well, Aristotle
liked balls. Thought balls
Aristotle
were the perfect
because
shape.
Aristotle had already assumed that eclipses were caused by the Earth casting a shadow on the moon, and it was curved, so he came to the conclusion that, well, must be that the Earth is a ball. And so people like Eratosthenes ran with that, if they were even real. So
Quick shout out to
themselves.
hold on, just a couple of quick shout outs to Sensual Goat. Love it. All of this sextant talk makes me feel very nautical. Very good.
Well,
hold on, just one more. Shout out.
That was better
That
than
was subtle.
anything 10th has ever done. I'm sorry.
That was subtle.
That was good.
Yeah, that was good, Samuel. Top marks. That was
deserves
brilliant.
a reread, that one.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, shout out to Theo Megawerty. He says, how many tangents can dance on the head of a pin? Epic. Thank you very much, both of you, for the super chats. I really appreciate your support.
That's not even close to the best. Everyone knows goats are.
Hold on a sec. Hold on a sec. Well, just because there's some logic that's getting messed up here. If Aristotle claimed that the shadow was caused by Earth being a sphere and getting in front of the moon, that would mean that the surface is curved, so Eratosthenes wouldn't be able to measure an angle to measure Earth's radius. So one of those two can't be true at the same time, can they?
That's correct.
I think the issue here, other than the amount of assumptions it's laden with, the sticky one for them is it's incumbent on parallel sun rays, isn't it? Because that's their straight lines, that's their parallels, the two parallels. Because he's assuming 2 points on a ball, 1 point is the 0 point, and then the cyan is the other point. But both the sets of sun rays are parallel. And that's why you're then able, with that knowledge, to determine the shadow distance. But it requires the assumption that light coming off of a ball emits parallel sun rays, which it doesn't.
But wouldn't he have to measure an
can
angle to affect that?
Can I destroy that in a minute?
Well, I just want to know how would he get the angle to assert that the rays are parallel?
But see, that's the thing. They took an angle line to something in the sky. And of course they used the surface of the Earth. But the only way they can transform that into a globe is to take that angle, right, and bring the same exact angle to the equatorial plane. As then they do have a flat baseline, which they require. So that required them to assert that the sun was very, very, very big and very, very, very far away. Remember I talked about the two-way speed of light earlier. That is a calculation based on 4 pre-assumptions and 2 averages. It's not a measurement. The speed of light was never measured. They need the two-way speed of light to be a measurement, which it isn't.
So you're saying the equatorial plane, I would have to dig a hole to the center of Earth to get an accurate, or to get an angle?
No, yeah, well, see, there you go. They took actual elevation angles off of an actual flat Earth. But the only way they can transform that into a globe version is they need, right, the sun to be very big and very far away, which involves a two-way speed of light calculation, not measurement. Speed of light was never measured. And they then assert that the angle they get off the top of the surface of their sphere, right, it can be transformed to the center of that sphere, and then they use the equatorial plane as their flat baseline. Completely ignoring, that way they get to completely ignore the curved surface. And what have we dealt with? 1 second, please.
Okay.
What have we dealt with? What have we dealt with for months now? Them avoiding the surface. Because that's what this is all about, them avoiding the surface. I brought out a video a while ago about the two-way speed of light and about how it was such a heap of nonsense and about the distance of the sun and all that. And I got ridiculous amounts of hate. Why? Because it kills their claim. It's all connected. Come on.
Right. 2 slides in Master B will show Brian's point precisely. Let me know when.
Yeah, I had him up while he was saying it. Good interruption. He was supporting you with the slides, Brian, that was all. But yeah, perfect. So the only place this actually works is along this very faded grey line that works to the actual centre point when they have an equatorial plane for the angle. They just justify the angle when they put multiple planes at multiple elevations with light travelling in parallel from a very, very distant sun that Brian's just described. Yeah, great slides. Thank you, Tenth. Did you want to go through them? Although I've just stole you.
Yeah, I just want to say, if you show the first one as well, it covered your point about the plane being directly above the boat. And the second one actually shows a plane over a boat, which is a black and white version. You can just ignore that ball. See that ball, that sphere? That's not reality. The plane is using a straight line, horizontal. The surface of the Earth is a plane, horizontal, and then they decide to stick a ball there and then say, well, the only way it works is if we transpose that straight plane to the center, as Brian was saying, the equatorial plane, so the angles can match. So everything that's the ball is not there. That's just made up.
Right, just before you go on. So if these parallel lines, although I haven't got enough screen real estate to actually show it, but we'll assume that they, come out to here just for the sake of diagram. That means that the point that you're actually calculating for would be along this line marked as celestial horizon. In other words, as we've just detailed, you're in the centre of a rock to make it work on a sphere, but this is an angle measurement, i.e. this hasn't actually been measured, and it's going to be measured miles beyond the sphere Earth parameters in terms of acquisition of a GP to the baseline that you've got 90 degree at. So the 90 degree that you're trying to acquire with all 3 of these parallel stupid lines with a sphere that's redundant at this point don't get you to the surface of the sphere. They get you to the surface of this line through the middle of the sphere. Now, So what have you got to do to believe you're on a sphere? Well, you've got to believe that you can take the angle measurement from the centre, and that the angle measurement's going to be taken out to an infinitely extending plane wherever it meets and dissects the GP of the star at 90 degree. We haven't got any of that. Like 10th just says, this is useless. The sphere bit doesn't do anything anymore. What you're actually using is a flat plane to get the angle, and you're not standing in the middle of a ball. You are standing on the surface. Well, when doing this, which one relates to the surface? Is it this one that you haven't used? No, it's this line. That represents the surface. It's the only way to do it.
I have to disagree with you because I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would say that the first thing you have to do is pre-assume that the two-way speed of light is a measurement and it's real, and that gives you a big, huge sun at a big, big distance away, and that the inverse square law doesn't exist.
Yeah, but
because without that...
But they got to that further along the chain of the history of heliocentrism. You know, you're not... Christian Huygens' assumptions that you're describing with that 1/2-way speed of light that they don't have, well, when you describe one of those assumptions was Christian Huygens, that's in recent history. So as much as you say they must start there, yeah, they've got to start by measuring flat Earth elevation angles. Let's get it clear.
Yeah, but they need to have parallel lines. See, this is why you can't really trust history too much. To have parallel light rays from the sun, it requires the sun to be a massive size and at a massive distance. And it also requires the light coming off the sun to not adhere to the inverse square law of light. And the only way they got the big massive sun at a big distance away...
Okay, well, I'm going to disagree with you, because in this methodology, when transposed from flat plane angle measurements to spheres with all the complex mass that goes along with it and isn't done when they're actually doing this methodology to navigate, in that process, you've said that they've got to have a two-way speed of light to get it to the assumptive values, and I said Christian Huygens, but they don't. They actually take it to an infinite distance when they do this off a celestial... what do they call it? The celestial plane in the middle? Is that what they call it? Celestial plane?
Equatorial.
Equatorial plane. When they do it with an equatorial plane, Brian, they're doing it to an infinite distance.
Yeah, but where do they get these infinite distances from? Where are they getting these distances from?
That comes later. That's my point. So you're well, I'm just saying it. That was a telling chuckle. I love it.
This is their reversey, isn't it? This is their you'll fall off the edge moment. But again, attackers, well, what's the height to your star? Well, all their heights are infinite. Why they ask us how high are our stars? Because theirs are a conceptual height.
Well, that's a misnomer, isn't it? Infinite distance. That's a misnomer.
That's what I was going to say.
Nathan, 2 more slides to show your point about.
We don't calculate it, as we've demonstrated. It's accepted that it's an apparent position, and the way in which celestial navigation is done means we don't need to assign a height to it. The way they're doing it, they don't need to, because they assign everything to Earth curvature. But they do, to get around it mathematically, do actually assign a figure of infinity. So we make an honest disclaimer that it's not calculated and it's just random, whereas they put it to infinity. And they have to, for it for the mass to work, to transfer all of the mass onto the shape of the surface. It has to go to infinity.
Yeah, got your first slide.
I just like to say...
Yeah, slide you got up now, and the one following will prove the point you were saying. So the sun, it has to have a zenith over a place on the earth with a vertical to a GP, which is a perpendicular, right angle, and you can see the sun is way out there. And on the second picture, if you go to the next one, you'll see that it's impossible the way they have. That's why everything on the previous 2 slides that's in the shape of a sphere is not even real. You can't have an elevation angle from a curved baseline.
Brian, did you want to get the last word in?
Don't
yeah.
that slide. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to state, Nathan, I have further disagreement with you, because you're stating that the tailway speed of light is a recent thing, when technically the size and distance of basically the sun being very big and a big distance away, that actually comes from Kepler's analemma, which is back in the 1700s or something like that before. So it's not that recent.
But
that's where what started with.
But that doesn't actually give you a value, does it? That's just for scaling. That you can apply that to scale once you've got values to scale with, but you don't have that at that point when Kepler's laying down those scaling values.
But they have to use Kepler's analemma. That's the average distance of the heliocentric globe to the heliocentric sun. The average distance between those two throughout a year. That is the baseline of the tailway speed of light calculation.
But that comes after the assumption once the distances are set with Christian Huygens' assumption.
Yeah, without Huygens, you can't use the transit, can you, to calculate? And you've got it's.
I'm going to stand my ground on this one, but I'm going to round out the live show and we'll get into the after show. I like how we're getting into high-level heliocentric discussions, though, Brian. I love this. This is ace.
Yeah,
anyway, with that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you, first and foremost, to all of you. Smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, smashed the PayPal link and all that good stuff. Of course, a massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, however, stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. I've been Nathan Oakley and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!